UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead. That gave me the dubious distinction of being the first person of cabinet rank in the G8 group of countries to say so unequivocally.
This is Paul Hellyer. He's a former Canadian politician and engineer known for his significant contributions to Canadian defense and transportation. Hellyer was born in 1923. He graduated from the University of Toronto in 1949 with a degree in aeronautical engineering. He began his political career in the early 1950s and served in various roles, including as Minister of National Defense for Canada from 1963 to 1967 under Prime Minister Pearson. During his tenure, he oversaw the unification of the Canadian Army, Navy, and Air Force into a single entity, the Canadian Forces. After leaving active politics, Hellyer became known for his outspoken views on UFOs and extraterrestrial life. In the early 2000s, he gained international attention for advocating full disclosure of alleged government knowledge about UFOs and extraterrestrial encounters. Let's check out his testimonial. Thanks for being here. Chris Lehto, welcome to LehtoFiles.
Although as Minister of National Defense, I had sighting reports of UFOs. I was too busy to be concerned about them at the time because I was trying to unify the Army, Navy, and Air Force into a single Canadian Defence Force. And that itself was a kind of battle to the finish. So this was not high on my agenda. But about 10 years ago, I started getting interested due to a young man from Ottawa sending me material on the subject. I told him I was too busy to read it, but he had confidence that someday I would. It took me a while to get around to reading it, but I took it for my summer reading in 2005 and was really impressed with what was contained in it. And what I thought to myself is there are huge issues here, huge issues. And the American people and the people of the world have a right to know what's going on because they're part of it. It's not just an isolated thing. I accept the invitation of Victor Vigiani, who's over here somewhere, and his cohort, Mike Bird, to speak to a symposium at the University of Toronto. And I said, UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead. That gave me the dubious distinction of being the first person of cabinet rank in the G8 group of countries to say so unequivocally.
Okay, so this was filmed in May 2013, and like he says there, it's the first person in the G8 high rank to say that UFOs exist unequivocally, and he was the Minister of National Defense. So pretty high knowledge for Canada. Pretty amazing.
In the 1960s sometime, it was a flotilla of UFOs headed south that crossed into NATO territory in Europe. And the commander-in-chief of the Supreme Allied headquarters in Europe was naturally very shaken. Fortunately, or maybe divine providence, before the panic button was pushed, the flotilla turned around and headed back north. Obviously, they had thought maybe they were Russian and they were very concerned about it. Anyway, an investigation was launched into this whole subject, and a document was prepared which concluded that at least 4 species had been visiting Earth for thousands of years.
That's just amazing. This kind of reminds me of ghost rockets. You know, in the 40s, they had thousands of sightings up in Scandinavia, Sweden, Norway, etc. And they originally thought it was V2 rockets coming from Russia, but they never found any debris, right? You would find some debris if you had thousands of rockets, some evidence that they were missiles, right? And there was also, after the war, they found there was no evidence of actual V2 stations in the Russian bases that they thought. So there was no evidence of launches from Russia. So what is this giant flotilla that just happens to come down from the north into NATO? Canada also maintains NORAD, right? So they, along with the United States, keep the northern border, because Russia, you go right over the pole from Canada, it goes right to Russia, right? So our northern border of the US is really Canada. So NORAD is responsible for the northern border of Canada. So Canada should have eyes on this whole area. That's probably why he also knows about the incursions into NATO, into Europe. And then he says there that there's been at least four species of aliens that have been interacting with humanity for thousands of years. And that came from a report. Amazing.
And this is my own view at this stage as well. So, except for that, there are just a couple of things that we've talked about that I'd like to refer to. And one was that we were referring to them as they until this morning when Linda Moulton Howe, I think she was the first one, actually named 3 different species. I don't think we can any more refer to them as they, because they're not an amorphous mass. They are different species and consequently may have different agendas. I don't think we can say that they all have the same agenda any more than we could say that the United States, China, and Russia had the same agenda. Our real interests may be very similar, but as of now, our perceived interests are still quite far apart.
It looks like Danny Sheehan there on the left. And I get this question a lot is, what are their intentions, right? That's one of the main things we want to figure out. And he says right there is there's several of them. And so chances are they have different intentions.
One more observation before I begin what I want to say, and that is that we spent quite a bit of time talking about the 66-year-old cadavers. And I was glad to have Linda this morning finally say that there are live ETs on Earth at this present time, and at least 2 of them probably working with the United States government. The other species that I learned about not too long ago was called the tall whites. And this is when Paula Harris broke the story just a few years ago. And through her good offices, I had the chance to talk for about 3 hours with former Airman Charles Hall and listen to this absolutely fascinating story of how he was working with, first of all, he was scared out of his skin. But after that, when he got to know them, how he was working with, and finally they became to trust each other and have a good working relationship with the tall whites at the gunnery range at Indian Springs, Nevada. And these tall whites were living on United States Air Force property.
Just amazing, right? He says there that there's at least 2 living aliens, this is in 2013, working with the U.S. government. And so David Grush has said that there are biologics. He's also said he doesn't know if they're alive or dead at any one point, so that this seems very different information. And now we go to the tall whites.
And working in cooperation with the United States Air Force and sharing technology with them. He wrote a book, incidentally, called Millennial Hospitality. There are 4 different versions, but Paula says that Millennial Hospitality, number 2, is the best. I think that's the one I read, and it's a very interesting read if you want to sort of get inside the problem of what it's like to bump into these people floating across the terrain in the desert. Enough on that for now. My interest is in full disclosure. And my only caveat is I think probably I would say 95 to 98% full disclosure. I know of 1 or 2 things that I'm not sure should be in the public domain, at least yet. They will be someday, I'm sure, but not maybe immediately. But just as children survive the idea of the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus when they become adult, I think that tax-paying citizens are quite capable of accepting the new and broader reality that we live in a cosmos teeming with life of various sorts. The fact that some other civilizations are more advanced than we are may be humbling. It exists, and is being kept secret by the same vested interests who control our destiny. Who are these vested interests, and what are they up to?
I've said in the past, governments and those in power have always kept this information secret, right? Back in the old world, when European powers were spanning out across the globe, the maps were kept extremely, extremely secret. They would never have given the information, right? Portugal learned how to go around the southern tip of Africa by going very far west, right? That's actually why they hit South America. That's why they speak Portuguese in South America, is because they were going so far west. That's actually how you were able to line up with the winds to actually pass the Cape of South Africa. They would never have told their enemies, the Spanish, right? They never told them how to do that. That would have been a huge disadvantage. They would have given up all of their advantage of getting into the East. And that made them extremely wealthy. That knowledge, right? It was really the information of how to get there, going very far out west, which is counterintuitive. You'd think you'd go along the West African coast, but that doesn't work based on the currents, how the world actually works. But going far west now, they learned could actually get to the East without having to go through the Middle East, right? Without having to go through the dangerous Middle East. And that made them the wealthiest nation in Europe. I'm sure Spain didn't give their secrets, right? When they were going through Mexico and America. Those maps, all that knowledge was extremely, extremely valuable. Information is power. Information leads to power, creates it. And so this has always been the case. Nations have never given up information that would degrade their power. And this is one of those things. This is information. As soon as it's released, now everyone can access it. Everyone in the world can get access to this amazing technology. Maybe they could make their own contacts with extraterrestrials. Imagine if you were somehow able to convince one of these powerful extraterrestrial, not even just civilizations. What if it's just passing by extraterrestrial ships? You're able to convince passing, who knows, tourists to help you, to help your nation. Think of the advantage you could get if that was the reality. Imagine. So that you're just not going to give up that information for no reason. There's no real benefit.
Well, Senator, you were talking about a military junta. In my opinion, that is true, but I have broadened and deepened the definition to cabal, and the cabal comprises members of the Three Sisters: the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergers, and the Trilateral Commission, the International Banking Cartel, the Oil Cartel, members of various intelligence organizations, and select members of the military junta, who together have become a shadow government of not only the United States, but of much of the Western world. The aim of the game is a world government comprising members of the cabal who are elected by no one and accountable to no one. And according to Mr. Rockefeller, the plan is well advanced.
Wow, amazing. So he names out the people he thinks are involved in this, the organizations, although he just says intelligence organizations, certain military figures. So this is, definitely your shadow government conspiracy. The problem with the conspiracy is if it doesn't exist, right, you can't prove it. You can't prove something that doesn't exist. So a lot of people say, where is the evidence? Right, all these amazing statements last time by Ross Coulthart. this time by a Canadian Minister of Defense and ex-Minister of Defense. Testimony, yes, is evidence in the court of law, but where is the hard evidence? Right? Where is the hard evidence? And the argument is it's kept locked up, right? It's kept locked up. But is this just a conspiracy of something that doesn't exist? This shadow government. Congress is certainly convinced with their recent acts. So they are going after it by attacking the money, and they're trying to instill eminent domain laws, which you notice Mike Turner and Mike Rogers shot down, who just happen to be the highest paid defense contractor lobbied people. Defense contractors have lobbied the most money to those people, Mike Turner and Mike Rogers, which is just amazing. And those are the guys that shot down the bill. But it's coming around for round 2, so we'll see what happens. Congress obviously believes that there is a cabal that exists.
Does this help you to understand why our civil rights are being taken away from us? I say us, because Canada too is included in the grand plan. Here we are more than a decade later fighting another war that can't be won. There is no country on earth powerful enough to protect its citizens against fanatical hate, as we learned from the Boston Marathon. And the mere attempt to pursue the impossible pits neighbor against neighbor and the state power structure against everyone. All of the freedoms won by the millions of men and women who fought and died in World War II are being flushed unceremoniously down the drain. The only hope of peace is a negotiated settlement. This will require a paradigm shift in American attitudes. It involves a de facto renunciation of the plan for a new American energy and the adoption of a pledge of cooperation with all humankind to build the kind of world which we are collectively capable of. Young people everywhere need to be challenged by a noble cause. They need to be involved in arresting global warming, creating a banking system that is just and sustainable, and lead the way in the transformation to the new reality that we have to live in harmony with our celestial neighbors, as well as seeking peace on earth.
Wow, amazing to hear people clapping there after those statements. A lot of people have asked, what happens post-disclosure if this is the reality and it is released to the world? What would happen? Would the world systems fall? And I'm actually optimistic here with Hellyer, is that knowledge that we're not alone, I believe, would unify humanity, would unify Earth. That, hey guys, we need to stick together. For in a very large cosmos, we're surrounded by many other civilizations, organisms, and we need to actually unify together, stop fighting each other. And we have the capability. So I'm optimistic actually for the future that we do have the technology. We do have renewable sources of energy. The sun hits us with more than enough energy than we need every day. Everything else on this planet's been able to live with just sun energy for the most part. I think we can as well, and we can slow global warming, heat, and even reverse it for our children. We could provide actually a UBI, universal basic income, to all humans with AI and robots coming on board. We could create actually the utopia. At least it seems obvious to me that there is a clear path to get to a utopian future in a very near future, as in our lifetimes in the next 20 years. But this could also be used for evil, right? You could go back to isolationism, using all these new technologies just to hold and instill your own power, create your own power. And what he's arguing here is that's what's happened over the last 80 years now, is that this information is being kept secret. Why? There's no benefit to the actual power systems to give up that information. They just give the information to the adversaries, to the enemies. No one wants to do it. It's like trying to take the toy from the dog, trying to take the meat bone from the dog. It's not going to release it, right? You have to actually entice the dog with something else. But if there's enough meat bones for all dogs out there, then could we actually unify as a species? Could we unify as a planet? I think we can, actually. I'm optimistic, but I guess time will tell.
In a word, In a word, we have to become spiritual beings and practice the one tenet that the world's major religions have in common. And that is the Golden Rule.
Okay, pretty amazing admissions there from Paul Hellyer. The only thing I heard from the 60s really that he would have had direct access to would be the NATO invasion, right, from the north of Europe, where the European commander basically said there's this flotilla coming south over the poles. They think it's the Russians. They go on high alert, and then it just turns around, right? The flotilla turns around and goes back north. After the investigation, they determine there's these 4 extraterrestrial civilizations that have been interacting with humanity for thousands of years. So that is amazing. This aligns with basically everything David Grush has said. There is a crash retrieval program. I think there's no reason for governments to actually release the information for these organizations that have formed. They've never done it in the past. You're not going to release your secrets. Portugal didn't give its secret information about how to get to the east to the Spanish. Probably never would have. Why? Based on hate, power, centralization. Just not going to do it. So he argues that's what's been going on. Can Congress get to the bottom of this through actual passage of legislation? A lot of people think it's not possible, but it sounds like if there really are 50 plus whistleblowers that are coming out, if they have direct access to this program and they think that it is humanity's right to know this information, then there is a chance we can get the information. Or there'll just be another Phoenix Lights events, and now the technology will be much more advanced. I mean, this is from 2013, and look at the cameras. It's just not that good, right? The tech is not there in 2013, right? When Phoenix Lights happens back in 96, you just did not have the camera technology. But now we will, or at least in the next 5 years. Camera technology is just going to improve drastically. So if Phoenix Lights events happens again, if we do get one of these many extraterrestrial visits, I think we'll get undeniable evidence. Or it's just an amazing conspiracy where you have extremely high-level ministers of defense completely confused. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button. It really helps, and it's free. Consider subscribing to get future notifications of when I release videos. And you might like this video recommended by YouTube just for you. If you want to support the channel, join these great people over here, get exclusive bonus content, then click this button here, patreon.com/Chris Lehto, or become a YouTube member. If you want to continue the discussion, go to UAP Society Discord. Links are all in the description. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.